Welcome and thank you everybody for joining our first Regenerate Cascadia information and update session. It's been nearly a month since the Regenerate Cascadia activation tour and summit wrapped up, and Claire and I couldn't be more excited to try and share just a brief glimpse into what has been happening over the past month. Firstly, before we start, I did just want to take a moment and say thank you to everybody who participated in our Cascadia activation tour, which occurred from October 1st through 30th. I wanted to say thank you to everybody who joined the Cascadia Summit and Festival of What Worked, November 3rd through 12th. I'd like to say thank you to everybody who's popped in since then. And then a huge thank you to everybody who has been trying to hang on and work with us through the Telegram group and threads since then. You all are the true heroes. Just so people are aware, we will be recording this session for anybody who can't make it and want to be able to share notes with people afterwards. This session will run for 1.5 hours, and we hope that the presentation won't take too long, but we do have a lot to cover. And then afterwards, we want to have a questions and answers session. And this is a kind of a first draft, and so we really do welcome any input and feedback. And we've also created space on the Miro board that we use, and you're welcome to go throw up notes and thoughts there. All of that to say that this is an emerging process, just like everything else. And Claire, I might turn it over to you. You're muted.
Yeah, so the land shapes, so this is part of our context setting, and we really want to do that to just start with, and I think we should go to the next slide. Brandon, there we go. So the land shapes the people and has shaped the long-standing history that has brought us to reside here. To give voice to Norm Leach, the director of the Vancouver Aboriginal Community Centre, the land was here long before humans, and it will be here long after. When we acknowledge the land, we acknowledge our complete interdependence with the land and all our relations. We acknowledge and thank everyone doing the work of regeneration throughout Cascadia and Salmon Nation. These acknowledgements do not exist in a past tense or a historical tense context. Climate change, extractive policies, and colonization are current and ongoing processes. And by living here, we are each part of the story of our place and have an accountability and duty to act.
A growing number of people are recognizing that to secure the clean air, water, and food that we need to survive healthfully, we have to become guardians of the places where we live. People sense the loss in not knowing our neighbors and natural surroundings and are discovering that the best way to take care of ourselves is to go out and take action for ourselves. When we define our places using the earth as a frame of reference, taking into account flora, fauna, landforms, climate, and so on, we are talking in terms of bioregions. We are here tonight because this work that we are doing and the work that you are doing is important. We have a choice and a brief window in time to shape the future for ourselves and future generations. It is up to Cascadians, each in their own way, to create and promote these changes and lead the way forward rather than to wait for someone else to do it for us.
So Regenerate Cascadia is being developed as a long-term vision and process that works with on-the-ground communities to design and implement new frameworks of governance, ecology, and economy for the regeneration and health of our bioregion. As many are seeing, this is much more than a tour and a summit. It is an opportunity to create a shared context for a Cascadia bioregional movement. With that in mind, some new context setting regarding the current and emerging governance and organizational structure is in order. Regenerate Cascadia is truly a complex organism that was birthed during the activation tour in October, and indeed it's still being birthed. There is some core structure that has helped to incubate a vision that is rekindling and inspiring a bioregional movement whose time has come. It is important that those newly joining the movement understand what exists from an organizational perspective, what needs priority and attention in order to keep up the momentum. Most importantly, How do people find pathways for co-creating what needs to emerge? We are not trying to be the movement per se, but instead to grow Regenerate Cascadia as an organizational and movement backbone to provide services and administrative support and funding to create the conditions for a regenerative movement to thrive. Together, we aim to connect organizers, projects, and communities doing the work and see them supported with the tools and resources that they need. And so just for those who haven't met me, although I think I've met most of you, but for the recording as well, I'm Claire Atwell. I'm a community artist and weaver based in Victoria, BC, in the heart of the Salish Sea, which are also the unceded lands of the Lekwungen and Wasanich speaking Coast Salish people.
And my name is Brandon Letzinger. I'm an organizer. I've been doing, I think, work around Cascadia and bioregionalism since 2005. And more recently, I'm the founder and director of the Department of Bioregion, a 501c3 nonprofit based here in Seattle. And I think just as importantly as all of that, who we are is a bioregional network of organizers, both, individuals, communities, and really leaders doing regenerative work out on the land. And together, we're kind of coming together to create this idea of Regenerate Cascadia and this movement backbone. Well, Claire and I are the primary conveners for Regenerate Cascadia. We are excited to partner with a fantastic community of catalysts from around Salmon Nation to ask ourselves the following questions and to acknowledge that the members of this growing community, just to say, I think to acknowledge the members of this growing community visible within the Telegram threads and online events, as well as the many local leaders who have joined us to help organize every aspect of this movement that grows and changes daily. And we wholeheartedly need to recognize the gifts passed on to us by the elders of the bioregional movement, and further back, the first peoples of this land, whose knowledge of place is a precious gift to all, including future generations, but whose worth has been severely attacked and nearly destroyed.
So for some historical context, Regenerate Cascadia started as a collaboration between Brandon and me during the 2023 Edge Prize, which is an initiative by Salmon Nation and the Terang Collective, designed to bring a community of edge walkers on the edge of different communities, but tied to the whole, to share open source Indigenous knowledge for a more resilient world. More than 140 edge walkers from around the Cascadia bioregion met for 8 weeks to explore place-based bioregional regeneration, to tell their stories and practice working cooperatively to distribute funding to regenerative projects. Much of the on-the-ground work needed for bioregional regeneration is being done in our communities, but too often the work is siloed and not connected. During the Edge Prize, Brandon and I recognized that mapping and empowering the work already happening was what was missing. We saw a huge opportunity through catalysts such as the Activation Tour and online summits such as the Regenerative Communities Network Summit last year to help weave a network that might spark a bioregional movement whose time has come.
So how can we be mapping our work and using the incredible energy as these one-time activation tours and summits to keep the work going afterwards for the long-term regeneration of our bioregion? The current goal for Regenerate Cascadia, as part of a planetary network of bioregions, is to develop a participatory framework of governance at a watershed, ecoregional, and bioregional scale, able to cooperatively steward a vision, to build an informational commons to map and track what works and help it inform bioregional learning, as well as to define clear metrics for success, and to assist in the creation of a bioregional regeneration fund that can support this work as defined by the landscape leaders themselves. Can we begin to break down the system-driven silos that are dividing our work to connect those doing similar work and shift from the model of competitive ecosystems to collaborative ones? More than just gathering together landscape leaders or having a series of conversations that highlight our work, we need new systems of governance. This requires us to work to cooperate locally and across scales in ways that most of us have never experienced or seen. It requires that we not just resist what is failing, but that we learn how to co-create the frameworks and pathways that our planet and communities need to regenerate our watersheds and bioregions. To do this, we need to create the conditions to support networks of trust led by dedicated people already doing this work in small, isolated pockets in their communities.
So just to recap on the activation tour, and I know many of you have heard some of this before, but just for context, we traveled to 14 different communities throughout Pacific Cascadia to learn, connect, and weave the regenerative work being done. We did this after having invited those willing to step up and help organize local gatherings such as presentations, workshops, community dialogues, or field trips. During the activation tour, we were only in each community for a very short time, yet the conversations and weaving that happened was electric. Wherever we went, we found that people were hungry to have these conversations. Over and over, we were told that people felt heard, that questions were being asked that they hadn't been asked before. People everywhere responded positively to the coherence of storytelling around a vision for a bioregionally interconnected Earth. People were just excited to discover others in neighboring watersheds and ecoregions that felt the way they did. Recognizing the activation tour as a catalyst for this vision was inspired by the success of two similar events earlier this year. The first involving 14 cities across the Great Lakes, the second involving multiple communities throughout the whole Colorado River Basin. Inviting the Design School for Regenerating Earth to join us for a month-long bioregional activation tour throughout Salmon Nation is exciting because of the potential to effectively share this vision through coherent storytelling. So it was exciting for the Design School for Regenerating Earth too. Not only was this their most ambitious schedule to date, it's the fact that this is Cascadia, probably one of the most active places on Earth when it comes to existing regenerative initiatives. So for those who don't know, the Design School for Regenerating Earth is an online bioregional learning platform that connects landscape leaders across bioregions. It was founded by Joe Brewer, Penny Heipel, and Benji Ross. And it was Joe Brewer and Penny Heipel that toured with us and was joined by Stephen Morris, who is a member of the Design School, to help with the tech support. One of the important principles that was established for doing the activation tours is that they needed to be invited into bioregions and watersheds. They did this donating their time free of charge in service to what the land needs. And for this tour, Victoria, BC and Canada and the Cascadia Department of Bioregion invited Joe and Penny to come and lead an activation tour here in the Cascadia bioregion. By working with the Design School for Regenerating Earth, this work it's really helped in helping it to become replicable and scalable globally.
Yeah, and I might just throw in real quick. I think we can do a little bit better probably at some point about doing a little bit of a report back from the actual activation tour itself. I think the important thing was that by inviting Joe Brewer to come and give a presentation, he basically had a really wonderful presentation in which he presented on how do we regenerate the Cascadia bioregion and was able to lay out a vision. And pretty much that by having that conversation in 14 different communities concurrently alongside of each other, we were able to create a high level of connection, face-to-face discussions, and really helping to facilitate a conversation about how can we co-create what comes next. So back over to you, Claire.
Yeah. So so it was our goal to bring the energy together from the activation tour. Oh, sorry, So the activation tour culminated in an online open space, a summit, and it was a festival of what is working. We made space for every person and group to present their work, including space for thematic conversations. And later that week, we invited watershed teams to come together to meet, debrief after the tour, and begin envisioning a shared regional vision. We finished on the following Saturday with a one-day unconference, a capstone event where we self-organized around specific theme dialogues put forward by those who felt called to do so. So it was our goal to bring the energy together from the activation tour to film and live stream where appropriate and document these lessons for broader audiences and participants of Regenerate Cascadia. Every participant and hosting team was invited to debrief and share their experiences using Miro boards, and then later coordinate follow-up conversations and meetings on Telegram. Learning from the process is a big part of how we develop trust and stay authentically connected to our communities. However, it is the land that is ultimately the organizer of everything. Thus, we're interested in collaboratively facilitating processes for data collection and evaluations around bioregionally significant markers, so that learning at different landscape scales becomes an integral part of how we proceed. We have been and will continue to gather our collective stories, lessons, and learnings through a written proceedings document, which we hope to share shortly. With the help of Stephen Morris, our wonderful tech supporter on the tour, we were able to live stream when the Wi-Fi gods allowed, as well as video interviews as we traveled. If anyone has a particular inkling towards this aspect of governance, please feel free to reach out so that you can help in the development of archival and clearinghouse materials.
And I'll just jump in there too to say, I think this is one place where I feel like we probably really haven't started yet. We did do a good job of archiving and documenting. We got all of the Zoom sessions from the Festival of What Works, about 40 different presentations, community presentations from people from around the activation tour and who are doing work. We were able to get those onto YouTube and onto the website. We did a good job also of documenting the videos of Joe's presentations. Those should all now be on the website. Stephen did an amazing job editing and getting up any of the presentations where the live stream wasn't good quality, and or if there's an issue with the audio. And then we do also have like the earlier info sessions from Claire and I, and then also our original Edge Prize submissions, all of which can help kind of create context. We've also done a good job of archiving the news articles that we generated as we went and from before and after the tour. But where we really need help is going through and documenting the lessons from the actual activation tour itself. And at some point, what that will mean is actually reaching out with every activation tour and leadership team, and getting pictures and stories. And what we did do is we did a lot of audio recordings. So we have like a lot of like audio recordings of the different sessions and discussions. And we'd love to actually put together a day-by-day kind of travel log of the activation tour, talking about, because at every stop we were doing discussions and workshops and field trips out and just meeting with really incredible people, both elders from the bioregional movement, people who have been involved with regenerative projects and communities for decades, and would really like to put that together. So when we actually have time, we'd like to actually probably create a proceedings booklet. And then also another idea is that we'd like to take this Cascadia Spoke and open it up for community articles. So a lot of the threads that have been in the Telegram where people are suggesting resources, we could actually use the Spoke as a vehicle for how do we build in these tools for building a regenerative movement, or that grow the capacity for a regenerative movement. And so finding those ways. And we've just really wanted to try to get, like, first off, we just need to get off of Telegram and have a landing place where our community can kind of live. And we've been really just waiting to get that in place. And it's just taken a lot longer. It always takes longer, and there's just a lot of people, a lot of energy. And so we are trying our best, but if anybody would like to help us with the archiving and documentation component, there's a big open invitation. So And Claire, back over to you.
Well, next slide, but I think. Yeah, so many issues are the same throughout Cascadia. Each community has lessons to teach and places to learn. Um, the work is happening in communities around Cascadia. They need to be able to connect with each other and find support. And thus we need to grow our ability to collaborate on larger scales. And the important principle I've already spoken to about being invited in and working with people excited about this process that are leaned in. And then the importance of having a shared context. It's very, this shared experience, language, vision, and purpose are really important for a sense of being part of a common vision. Did you want to speak to this one, Brandon?
I think so. Each of these could probably be its own slide, and we actually probably forgot even a few things like leading with questions, not answers, and a few other things. But one of the important things I think is more than like answers or solutions. We are creating a framework of guiding values. And some of these are things like bioregional, so working with natural boundaries as opposed to arbitrary lines on maps. The generational component, that it's a long-term, that the work that we're doing is not that we might be in a sprint right now, but that we're not expecting change to happen tomorrow. That we need to be in this for the long haul. And so within that, it needs to be regenerative. So we need to be treating ourselves well. We need to be treating each other with mutual respect. Pro-social is a really important component. I know that there's a lot of people who can speak really well to that, but that's establishing the frameworks for what a healthy group and governance system can look like. Whole systems thinking is really important. So rather than individual silos, really breaking it down and into the whole picture, both in terms of our social ecosystems, but actually the places in the land itself. So rather than individual silos of different organizations or nonprofits or this or that, that we actually come in and really think about it on the scale of landscapes and how those landscapes fit into the watersheds and how those watersheds fit into the larger regions, and then the bioregions and how the bioregions connect together. And then within that, how we can be creating subsidiarity so that there are these well-defined membranes that allow for self-organization and that people have the tools needed so that they're supported. Paul Cheragino talks also about this three horizons solution of basically thinking about where we are today, where we want to be, and then what are the intermediary steps and how we're relating into this larger extractive system as we start to build in these regenerative processes. I think also from the start, really working with the First Nations who live here. I think Jay Bowen was like a really wonderful, it was really wonderful to have him open up our bioregional summit, but there were a lot of people that we met and talked with. And it's really important that at the start, as we're building in these, that we're working with all of the different people living here, and making sure that our language and our visions is like from the start is including the voices that need to be present for us to actually have real buy-in from many different communities and peoples. So that also means, as we create these maps, that we're also always continually looking around, seeking the voices who aren't present, inviting them in, seeing how we can do better. And a few other things, just that, we're building in principles like privacy by design. That means people own their own data, that they always that like they need to consent if people are using it, and that we're handling information responsibly. This list kind of goes on, and we welcome other principles as well. And each of these could be like a whole little lesson in of itself, but they can really help guide how we're moving forward.
Yeah. I might just say as well that, coming from the design school, from Earth Regenerators, the work that Brandon's done with bioregional, And the people we've worked with, this was kind of like a gathering of these principles that we have used to help guide the process so far, and that it's the scaffolding that's supporting what we're bringing forward, but it was a good place to start. It's not, everybody is going to need to be participant in helping to think through and add to or challenge what's on here eventually. But for now, this is the scaffolding, and we'll get into that in a minute. But I just wanted to make sure that was clear.
Yeah, and David, I see you mentioning in the comments that it would be nice to have a slide per topic, and I think that that's a great idea. We'd want to move quickly, but it would be nice to give a really nice definition and visual representation for each of these points. I think within that too, part of just for kind of like how we discuss and talk about things, when we do say bioregional for our own group, we do talk about in the framework of watersheds, ecoregions, and bioregions. And the reason why we use this framework is that this is kind of the scale that nature acts upon the land. And so if we want to talk about whole systems thinking and whole systems processes, it necessarily needs to include this, everybody who lives within these areas, all of these ecosystems, all of these drainage basins, whether we're talking about salmon or wildfires or earthquake preparedness, food or other preparations. This is the largest kind of extent where these connections can make sense. And this framework helps us break down global intangible issues to a local level where we can actually create definable metrics about whether the things we're doing are successful, whether they're not working. And also, just in case you're curious, for example, it's a better way to maybe look at boundaries and borders than, say, arbitrary nation-state borders like the US and Canada. If you're not aware, I just always like to include this because the US and Canadian boundary was defined by a war over a pig between an American farmer and a British farmer on one end of San Juan Island and the other end of San Juan Island. And because of that dispute, they just kind of drew a line down the middle of an island chain. So this idea of bioregionalism really just means starting with the realities of the place and growing up from there and finding better and more healthy ways that can help represent both the ecosystems, the place, and also the people living here. Claire, do you want to jump into this one?
Yeah, so this was just a reflection of what has been going on over the last month. So we have over 100 people on Telegram. Quite a lot of them are quite active, and then using mirror boards to try and track like all of the busyness that's going on, but in a way that makes it coherent and transparent to anybody really wanting to come and look at what is going on. So, at first it's probably a bit confusing, but at least the information is there, and we have tried to put it into a logical form, so that what has happened is visible. So, and the mirror boards are this amazing tool that I know Brandon hadn't heard of a mirror board before the summit, and I think he got introduced to it. I think he's really I think that's your thing, Brandon.
Well, and it's not about any one tool. So I'll just say, like with the Miro board down the road, I would actually love to turn it into a wheel. I think having it as a wheel would be really cool. But it's not about any one tool or other. So I think the most important thing of like, I would say that in the past month since the activation tour, we have been, I think, intensely bustling along, trying to figure out what our next steps are. And we've been working in a Telegram group. And the way I would define it is that we have 100+ people in a Telegram group desperately trying to get off of Telegram. And so we've been doing that in a few different ways. But first and foremost, we're figuring out what we're building. So we've been working with people to actually figure out what the types of groups, what's the structure, How are we communicating with each other? So, okay, we have a Google Drive. How are we setting up the Google Drive? What are we calling things? And it's kind of been a big kind of growth of a lot of initial meetings. And we've had meetings that are both administrative. We've been having envisioning meetings. We've been having kind of structure meetings. We've also been having a website group that's been meeting every Tuesday, that's open for anybody who wants to join, who can come and talk about what do we need to see in the website. And so really trying to create a website that can be a front end for people, that can interface with the public, that can give groups the tools that they need to have their own, information collection forms, and have a calendar, and have updates that kind of are threaded into it. And then how we kind of connect together in a back end so that there's like autonomous self-organizing and sovereignty in the front, but connected together through a back end so that there's not a silo. We've also been building the website then as a place for organizers and organizer tools. So what are the tools that our organizers need? And even like, what do we call organizers? What do we call people on the website? What is that shared context and the vision and the purpose that we're kind of creating together that we can invite people into? And that idea of the shared context is so important. And so within that, we're also learning that we need to have onboarding, right? Like there's a lot of like tutorials and how to, but also even just in terms of where are Joe's presentations? Where are the videos from the summit? What are the things that we need to kind of help translate and introduce people to as they get introduced to Regenerate Cascadia? So through all of this, we've been developing our process through a lot of initial meetings, and we're kind of working with this idea of watershed hubs, which are like, Regenerate Whidbey Island, Regenerate Whatcom, Regenerate Eugene, Regenerate Victoria. And what we're really trying to do in this early stage is find and model a few core groups that really kind of want to go through the process and help guide us through the process. And then we're working with each of them, that as they're having their meetings and as they're talking about and as they're gathering people together, as they're coming up with questions, we're constantly challenging and critically examining what's working, what's not working, what's confusing, what's extraneous. And then we're actually trying to build a system around that that can support their needs. And then the third component, I think, of this digital platform, website, whatever, is an actual community component. And this has taken us probably the longest. We literally just got it kind of live on the website like a day ago, which is why it's been a little bit of a interesting last couple of days, been a little bit busy. But the idea is that we need to have a place off of Telegram where groups can meet, where communities can meet, where they can have resources, where they can have their own calendars, where they can have all of this own information, and people can go and join, where we're not the bottlenecks, right? And we'll always probably have a Telegram group. We'll always have an email. We'll always, we might have other things too. Some people might use Hilo. Some people might use Mastodon or Discord or other services, but having that central Regenerate Cascadia hub is really, really important. So creating that onboarding and the tools, and even just figuring out an initial structure of what we're trying to build, has been, I mean, it's amazing to see what's happened in a month with the people who have been involved and who have been taking this on. So, sorry, back over to you, Claire.
Yeah, no, that's great. So some of this is going to sound sometimes kind of hard to figure out the flow of telling you about things, but we wanted to let you know some of the things that are happening in the back end. So designing for a bioregional bioregional landscape fund for the regeneration of Cascadia. And so we are actively developing the support structures required to administer a bioregional landscape fund for Cascadia. And what we're meaning by that, and we're going to get into this as we keep going, is having in place the whole idea that's supported by that concept of subsidiarity. So that's the lowest level of decision making that a decision can be made at, is where it's made. And if it can't be made at that level, it moves up a level. And so the watershed hubs are where, sort of at the base of a triangle, are the ones that are the most able to know where the funds, what the projects are, where the work is being done, how to prioritize it. That's where that decision making needs to be made. Um, and uh, and so the diagram here, if you've got a smaller screen, I'll just explain it to you, is the triangles represent some of the projects that are in the landscape, the people who would most know who, uh, the value of those projects, and who is needing support and how to prioritize the support that's required are going to be the people, the core teams at the watershed scale. Um, and and then added into that is also the guilds that are forming across ecoregions and the bioregion. And yeah, and so the case study. So we're busy writing up a case study for Regenerate Cascadia that describes how we are collaboratively co-creating with core watershed hub leaders throughout Cascadia the scaffolding required to effectively weave and support relationships in their watersheds. Um, and a case study that points to the need for developing local coordinated data collection that is consistent and useful across jurisdictions in all the way to the bioregional scale, and that identifies and helps to coordinate with key bioregionally significant learning centers where the data collected across the bioregion can be used and analyzed in order to inform coherent decision making. And at a watershed and bioregional scale, provide core teams with the necessary scaffolding um, to eventually manage large flows of capital to regenerate landscapes as administered by the projects and communities themselves. So obviously that's something that needs to happen over time, but that's what we're sort of looking at what would need to happen. And we're sowing the seeds for that by writing up what we're doing. And essentially what's important to think about with that is just that when we start to come together, we actually start to see that we're way more than the sum of our parts. We're actually starting to do something that is really significant in terms of regeneration. So yeah.
Yeah, and just to kind of also add on, and actually kind of pull it back for a second too, just to touch on things like the Telegram, the website, the other, Miro, and all of those are tools, but they're not the tool, right? And the point and purpose of everything that we're doing has to be connected in to the on the ground projects, the people with, boots on the ground, shovels in their hand, who are actually doing the work, whether or not they ever touch a computer. So our job then is like, as this like administrative spine, is how can we get them the support? How can we help visualize their work? How can we see them have the tools they need to get the funding or find volunteers or have help with administration or grant writing or whatever? And then how can we also visualize people to each other so that they can connect and do the work that needs to happen? And they may use some of these tools or they may not. And at the end of the day, for this to be successful, it shouldn't matter whether they do or not. Like, we should have these frameworks in place through these hubs, through these guilds, through the projects and other things that we can be supporting that work. And so ultimately, that's the long-term goal. And I think so within that, I think what we're seeing is that more than an organization or something else, what we have is an emerging mycelial web of regenerative projects, communities, and group leaders. So our job then is how do we build in the backbone which can help enable the conditions for a successful regenerative movement between these groups to thrive. Just to list off, this is like a very helter-skelter, last-minute, thing. But just to list off, like, what have we actually been doing in the last month? To give a little bit of an example, we have had a lot of different people organizing around different groups, again, working to help us model and build in some of this initial structure. We've been doing that through local groups, and there have been people actively talking and working together in Whidbey and Whatcom, in Victoria, Eugene, the Columbia River, Portland. Many of these groups have already had their first meetings. Many of them are having more starting in January. And a lot of them have been having gatherings of the core leadership, and then trying to slowly invite people in and then figuring out how to open it up to the public. We've had different guilds. And so again, guilds are this idea of a uh, basically like knowledge communities, or kind of like kind of expert topic, like they're around one topic, but it gathers people together and then really challenges on how can you take that topic and share that expertise to help get more people involved. How can you share the lessons and knowledge and wisdom to everybody across all watersheds, across all scales. So that's things like a seed guild, a mapping guild, an education guild, a pro-social guild, disaster preparedness and resilience. We've had other people kind of starting to emerge who have wanted to help specifically with things like fundraising and grants, communications and PR, finance and accounting. So trying to figure out how those groups kind of flow together. We have had other more informal groups, but around Web3 and digital platforms has been a huge interest for people. That also involves governance, that also involves tools that we can use, and then absolutely about community art as well. Another thing that started is Jan at the headwaters of the Columbia River has started doing a weekly Regenerate Cascadia campfire, which is an online just really community building exercise where we come together and talk with no agenda, but it can help us kind of grow that relationship and the relationships of trust. On the back end in the Google Drive, things that we've been kind of working on is Paul Cheragino helped us create a group formation log to track different people who are starting different groups. We've started putting together an organizer handbook. We want this to kind of we want to have kind of a central organizer DNA. We want to have organizer resources. And then again, we do have a Miro note board. And then we have started to put together some documentation from the tour, all the recordings, and then onboarding and tutorials. But this is going to probably be one of our next big steps, is kind of helping do that. And then for each of these groups, the component that is really threading it together as part of Regenerate Cascadia is the idea of kind of this core stewardship teams. So that if you want to kind of create a group like this, we're asking people to take on a certain level of accountability and responsibility for helping get that information onto the website, onto the calendar, onto an online community. And so these stewardship teams are kind of serving as a feedback loop, where they can bring the information, like basically we have decentralized self-organizing, but these groups are threading and bringing that information and the knowledge back to the central hub and creating accessible pathways for the public to go and find them. So these are a few of the things that I think we've been doing in the last month. Within this, another thing that we are working to kind of like, it needs to be cleaned up and polished a little bit, so we don't share it a lot yet. But everybody who signs up for the website is also becoming a part of this regenerative movement map. And what's exciting is that this can show some of the work from the activation tour and our connections. And the two things we've been really looking at are helping collect people together by place and helping to connect people together by interest. And so what's nice is then if we form a bioregional mapping guild, we actually already have a group of 100 people that we can directly communicate and contact and invite in. And so again, working with those stewardship teams, we can thread all of those together and create these pathways that someone who's never heard of Regenerate Cascadia, or maybe they're leaned in and but have never really been involved, they have a clear and easy way to get involved no matter where that organizing is happening, but they can find information about it. They can see it on the calendar. They can see blog report backs, all of which we're still kind of building in.
Yeah, maybe I would just add, it really is an attempt to build in the transparency, accountability, supporting an information commons so that the learning isn't lost when people and organizations change over time. Yeah, and so it's also, part of the relation, like really leaning on the relational side of things. because as it's an age-old challenge with an information commons. How do we make sure that information is dynamic and part of a changing learning process? And if the relationships are more visible, it helps. Even if somebody's dropped off, you can see who else might have been part of that group. So it's a way of trying to make the system, everything, as visible as possible, just so that it improves the level of agency that people have.
Yeah, and a big thing, I mean, we need to update still is so a lot of our forums and the website originally was geared for the activation tour and then the summit. And we just need so much cleaning. And in terms of like one of the big issues we had was we didn't have like island communities represent. Like, we did the top 100 cities and it didn't adequately represent island communities. So like that's a huge issue. And then we also now need to adapt the initial activation tour locations to actually be more representative so that new groups can also emerge in places that we didn't hit on the activation tour. And so there's just so much cleaning up and work there. And along with that note, what's really nice is that we've had a few people emerge who have been kind of helping us in the back end. So I think we just wanted to take a minute and recognize the people who have kind of also, beyond Claire and myself, who have actually been really helping us hold and create. So Claire, do you want to mention anything on
Yeah,
that?
yeah. So I don't know if you recognize them, but Jeff McNeely, Julie Wolfe, and Tanya Wozniak. And she might be able to. Yeah, it makes a really big difference to just have some of the things that we're just starting to just get overwhelming. Things are still pretty overwhelming, but it's help. You can kind of feel that things are starting to get just it's great to have someone else holding that, and it's also good to have others learning some of the back end.
Yeah, and just to be like specific, because there are so many other people who are helping hold things, especially
Yeah.
on a watershed level, on a guild level, who have been helping us build in the group logs, the back end, who have been giving us feedback and input as we've been creating the documents. So it's really important to name them too. And but really, Jeff and Julie and Tanya, Claire, myself are helping. What's nice is so Julie has kind of stepped up and is helping us with the website. So get information on there for the hubs, for the guilds, help get us, these online communities figured out. Tanya has really stepped up into a people support role. So helping people walk through with onboarding, get set up on the website, answer questions, and really be a person-to-person interface, which is so wonderful. And then Jeff has really been helping us, I guess, I don't even know what you'd call it, like on a DevOps level, where really helping us with like server information and figuring out like project management software like Azure and exploring potential tools that we might need to use in the future that can help us keep better track of what's going on, and then also help us kind of create cohesion as a team and as a group of people working with a goal. So yeah, and just a huge thanks to everybody who's been making these happen, both on that bioregional level and then also on the guild level and on the watershed level too, and on a project level and everything else.
And maybe I think it's worth just saying as well that all of us are, all of us here on this call are dedicated to what we're doing. I don't know that any of us are being paid for doing that work, and that hasn't gotten in the way of doing this. It's not sustainable to continue working without pay, but just to kind of, it's really worth highlighting the fact that this work needs to happen, and it needs to happen with or without pay at this point. Um, yeah. And just maybe a note, we've been talking about this is I've referred to myself as an unpaid worker rather than as a volunteer. There's something about the framing and language that is this is really important work and it needs to be done. So
Yeah. I guess I'll jump on that too. I think it's actually very important that we don't use the term volunteer, right? Like we use the term ambassadors, use the term stewards. all of these other frameworks, but very specifically, I think it's important that we do actually want to see people paid and supported for this work, and I think it's important. And I think starting out, actually, like, well, it has been unpaid. We are looking into trying to figure out what an initial budget looks like, what initial hours, and I think to start with, it's probably going to look like something like 20 hours for myself, 20 hours for Claire, 10 hours for Tanya, 10, and I don't know, Julie, we haven't even talked about this, but 10 hours for Julie, and then 5 or 10 hours for like the tech support. And then also maybe starting to think about too, watershed hub coordinators, guild coordinators, like those need to be supported work. That role of the weaver is a huge ask. It is, and it's not like a fun volunteer task of haha, but it is like it's a really important job that allows the group and the movement to function. Like it is like a spine, and we want to be supporting people in that. So we will probably be finding, I think we'll talk about this later, but at some point soon, we are going to start supporting people and paying them. And I think we will then send a challenge out to people to help us see these teams supported and see people supported in the work that they're doing. And then in the longer, yep.
I'm just going to say, just time check. We're coming up to an hour soon. Sorry, carry on.
Okay, no, that's great. And so it's not like we only have another million slides left. So yeah, we've already talked a lot about this. But in terms of like the actual movement that we're building, we are building this backbone. And the idea is that when people join the website and do the onboarding, they become ambassadors. So they can represent bioregionalism and regenerate Cascadia and regenerative principles and practices, and have watched Joe's presentation, and they have a little bit of the language and the context and the shared vision. Beyond that, when someone takes an active role and steps up and starts a guild or a project, they become a stewards. And then from that, those stewardship teams help run these watershed hubs, bioregional learning centers, projects, guilds. And when those hubs and guilds can come together on a larger scale, it can help us form these congresses. And I think at the scale of these ecoregion or bioregional congresses, in the future is where we'd like the governance to also kind of sit. But yeah, do you have any thoughts?
Yeah, just to sort of really highlight that this is a hybrid system of an emergent movement, but it's also being supported by a fairly traditional nonprofit organization that maintains the administrative, legal side of things, as you were saying, the banking, the insurance, the like all of the structure that actually allows us to do some of the stuff that we've been able to do. And it has a board, and we're really looking to kind of, we will talk to that in a minute, just how that, so the organization was registered as the Department of Bioregion, and there's going to be some shifts coming on that too.
Yeah, and I think we'll touch on that in a minute, but I think that that is an important note. And all to say, though, that the point of the structure is not to say yes or no. So we're trying to build a movement infrastructure, right? Not just here both here in Cascadia, but also in other bioregions around. So we're creating these templates and frameworks and tools. And just like we're working with watershed hubs, we're also talking with bioregional activation teams like in Lebanon, in Colorado, in the Great Lakes, in California, all who want to come together and work under this like regenerate kind of thing. So we have an opportunity to help create that. In terms of like the structure we're creating, that nonprofit structure, it's not to say yes or no, right? It's not to approve the activities. It is literally just to help ensure alignment to the mission and purpose. And if something is supporting the alignment, then we are here to support that. And we want to give them the tools that we can. And that includes things like insurance and legal support and accounting support, as well as digital tools. So Zoom accounts, Miro, emails, and all of these other things that might be helpful. And then lastly, it really is this digital platform that can help bring people together and connect people and help visualize what the work that people are doing.
Yeah, so yeah, so the website, we really want to just really highlight that it's a developmental learning guiding, where the process is guided through the design. And what we've discovered is that off-the-shelf digital platforms and versus building a good enough for now and safe enough to try bricolage style website that embeds the co-creative process into what we're evolving is part of, like, it's like the actual structure is not separate from the process, and that we just couldn't buy off the shelf um, digital uh, plugins to that we've been using plugins, but when it suited what the purpose was. So really paying attention to form follows function. Um, yeah.
Yeah, I think just to be specific to this, so it's been a really interesting learning process. Claire and I met on the Edge Prize, which was done on Hilo, which is like an alternative media platform. We really wanted to integrate with it, but every time there's just a few things that are holding us back. Like there are so many things that are 80% there. And what we didn't want to do, what would have been an easy solution would have been to jump to something like a Mighty Network, where it's basically like a Facebook, right? We don't want to just be on another Facebook. We want to actually use this opportunity to co-create where our home is and actually build in the principles that are really important to us. So we want to build in privacy and make sure that our data is not sold for corporate profit of a mega conglomerate. We want to build in, tools that we actually use. And there are so many people out there trying to do similar things, and they all have struggles. And actually supporting their work is something that I think at some point I would love to see us do through this. But it should be by people who want to adopt it and support it. And then what we need to do is create a really good community and space where that can grow. So just in case people are like kind of curious about an initial timeline, so it has been 1 month and it's been really amazing. We do have the holidays coming up, and so we're going to continue to try and build everything in. We're going to keep organizing on Telegram, but we really want to have all of this active and gearing up by January. And in addition to just the online platform, we want to create spaces that can help actually bring the movement together. In terms of things like bioregional update sessions, monthly organizing meetings that can bring together all the different organizers, projects, communities, weekly shared work times where we can just sit together, work together, bounce ideas off of each other. People have already started doing, Jan and others have started doing these weekly campfires. But if there's interest, those drop-in sessions, so they're really good for 8 or 9 people, or even 5 or 6 people. And if they get too big, it can, you want to really actually have time for really authentic communication. So we might have more campfires, or people really liked the Regenerate Cascadia pollination session we did in the unconference. So we might actually host a monthly regeneration pollination where we have these like one-on-one, just get to meet each other events. And then we want to compile everything into email newsletters and also have updates on our website. So really trying to communicate everything that's happening, how people can be involved, and then pulling it off of Telegram. We can still use Telegram as a tool, but we do want to kind of create these other tools. For this, we already touched on it, but we invite everybody to form stewardship teams around guilds or hubs, or if there's projects that you think are really important. What a stewardship team means is just that you're taking on that responsibility that can communicate the knowledge, updates, lessons learned from a group or project and bring it back to the spine, and share it with everybody else and make sure that it's accessible. We hope that in the future too, that our online community space can be more than that. So that if there is a pro-social guild, if there is a bioregional mapping guild, if there is a seed guild, one of the responsibilities of those guilds is actually to create 101 classes and onboardings and presentations that then become freely available resources for people to learn, and that they can take these like self-guided classes, or they can develop cohorts that can actually get people integrated with permaculture or pro-social principles, or these other things. So together we're actually creating resources and knowledge and sharing wisdom across watersheds, as we also organize in place. I'm just going to skip on over this, but we've got lots of thinking about hubs and guilds. Again, A hub is just a coalition of local regenerative stewards, projects, and communities within a bioregional boundary. We still don't even quite know how these work. In terms of like maybe there's a lot of hubs in an area, along a watershed. Maybe they come together as a congress, but what's the appropriate scale? How do they work together? That all still needs to be figured out. But what is exciting is that a Regenerate Hub does exist to bring together the projects and communities within an area and shift the thinking to a landscape framework, bring people together and try to get support around creating a story of place, a regenerative vision. So we really want the governance to start from the ground up and grow out of every place. And so as if every watershed develops their own visions, their own informational commons, their own stories of what's working, what's important, and who's doing the work, then we can kind of grow that up and be building that in together. Along with that, then we have this idea of kind of bioregional guilds, which are these communities of knowledge and topic experts. And they can be translating and sharing the knowledge and wisdom that helps connect it to people, both the general public and then also Regenerate Cascadia ambassadors and stewards. Yeah, so I think I'll just leave it there. On the topic of fundraising, our hope is one of the big things for creating like this kind of nonprofit backbone is that every group will be able to do its own fundraising, manage its own budgets, have its own payroll, have its own staff. And then we kind of bring that together to create these larger bioregional budgets. So we want to create also like an interlocking form of fundraising where every group can fundraise on its own, but also we want a portion of all donations that go to the Regenerate Cascadia like central hub will actually go out to support watershed hubs and guilds. So this idea is that we want to, at some point, have a landscape regeneration fund that can move large amounts of money to regenerative communities and projects. We do not have the governance in place right now that we need for how to work together. So starting right now with each of us through small donations, maybe through grants, maybe through other things, we can start to build that in with small amounts of money so that we can actually figure out how we work together, how are we funding different projects, and how are we doing all that? And we can do it in lots of different places, have lots of experimentation and see what really works and doesn't work. And then what we can really do is provide a backend that provides transparency, accountability, and that you can see a clear pathway for how that money is handled, where it goes. So yeah, I think all of this to be said, no one is being really supported yet, but I'm actually I think it's really important that people get paid. And I'm actually going to step up soon and actually just kind of like help put money up out of pocket to help support Claire and other people with initial job positions and roles. That will all be kind of decided as a group and kind of through the Telegram and other things. But what's really important is it's not going to be a lot. It's not going to be what we need, but it gets us started. And then I'm going to use that, and I would like to use that as a method to challenge people next year to help match me and help actually like help get people supported so that we can start an initial budget. So how do we support our time? But also how do we need to make sure that our technical back end is supported. And then we need to actually really create the structure so that different hubs can fundraise for themselves, and also so that we can be supporting the hubs, so that we can be supporting guilds so that they can have the tools that they need as well. I'm guessing that if we can be up by January and starting to talk with initial people, I would like to actually do a little bit more of a launch campaign around February and March, and then do that together where we can kind of all come in and co-create that and figure out what that looks like together. Because I think we have a lot of really amazing, talented people, and it's going to take all of us kind of working together to do that. Yeah, I don't know. Claire, do you want to jump in on this?
I think we should actually open it up to
Yeah, I think
questions
we're
and discussion
about
where
done. So, and all of that to just say, I guess, to end is that everything that we are doing, we do have an opportunity for this to be replicable and scalable. So all of these resources and things that we're creating actually have the possibility of going elsewhere too. So while we are thinking about a Regenerate Cascadia leadership team, for the governance side of things, we need to keep a space open at the top for us actually to create a Regenerate California, a Regenerate the Great Lakes, a Regenerate the Mississippi. And ultimately, it's all of us coming together that can kind of create that top level governance scaffold too. So be thinking about ourselves in a broader context as well as a local one. And I think that's it. So.
So maybe once you've stopped screen sharing, Brandon, thank you. I just want to say that was a lot of information, especially right at the end. And I think each section probably could have some expansion on it, but maybe there are things that just popped out at you that you're wanting clarity on, or yeah.
There were a couple questions in the chat. I'm aware of Claire Strawn. Did you get yours answered? And what Brandon was talking about?
Oh,
I know where to go to get them answered if I need it later. But I mean, I think you mentioned how the onboarding, like when I go to Telegram, I just see the last people I talk to. I don't see a central menu and how do you get there and those kind of things. So I know that's being worked on. And I just want to say this is a phenomenal amount of work and vision and implementation that you've done. It's so impressive.
And about the financing.
yeah,
It's
yeah.
emergent.
Well, maybe it's worth saying this. I mean, and I did sort of mention it briefly. It's just that, just because it hasn't been funded doesn't mean that it's not, like, this is the most important work right now that you're like we should be doing, and it does need to be funded. And there are quite a lot of people who know that it needs to be funded, that are coming more from traditional finance places. They don't necessarily, but we need projects that are well coordinated enough together. We need to learn to cooperate together to be able to show that we actually are capable of handling the money. And actually, the thing is, a lot of this work we've actually figured we've been doing because we knew it was the right work to do. Even the people doing the regenerative work on the ground have known and put their energy into that. And it's just yeah, as we come together, we actually make ourselves fundable. It's actually just presenting it as a case study that starts to basically, people need to be able to see more than just a whole bunch of disconnected projects. They need to see it working at the scale of a landscape. Yeah, even not associated with the presentation. If one thing we would really appreciate is if there were areas where you felt that we could have expanded more, or if we could have given a lot less, and if they're just questions, just generally. Mike.
Yeah, mine's not so much a question. I think once we're, I've mentioned this once before, but anyway, once we're largely away from Telegram, I think there's a lot of valuable information in there. It's hard to find, and so I've been doing some research on how we can, make that information available. And I'm thinking the best time is after we're not using it much anymore, because we've got all the other alternatives. I could do it at a point in time and then do it at another point in time, so that we can go to something that finds, the key points. That's what I'm looking at anyway.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. I think getting the knowledge off of Telegram that's been shared there into a easily searchable, indexable place, and also where we can actually have a conversation about it and all learn and teach each other is really important. And I think that's also where I'd like to invite people to contribute to the Cascadia Spoke. We're not set up for it, but the Cascade, but what we're we've done a couple issues of it. But what the Cascadia Spoke is it's a 20-page in-print newsletter, and then we mail it out. We usually do a run of about 2,000 copies. It's inspired by Raise the Stakes, which was the Planet Drum newsletter that they did. And the thing that I really appreciated about it was the place where the bioregional movement was able to talk to each other, critique, share ideas, and learn from each other, share updates for decades. And unlike a website where websites disappear and then they're not available, or Google changes its algorithm, you can actually go and get an entire collection of Raise the Stakes and read it from cover to cover and actually see the knowledge of 20 or 30 years of people writing and talking to each other. And I just think that's so valuable. And I would love for us to open up community dialogues that's both on a website, but also in print, also in person, also in email, also, in all of the places together. So, and Mike, so thank you for also taking that on to get some of that out of the Telegram. And when the website is ready, we'll get it up there as well and into these different forums.
Before we go to Langdon, I would like to just say that, like, we're really aware that there are whole groups of people that are not here represented. One of the areas, there are not many First Nations people here, but the incredible stories of place, they were the original bioregionalists. They, living on the land. So sharing that wisdom. There are mostly women that are part of the fiber shed, that movement. I don't really see them represented here that much. There's a whole bunch of groups that we actually haven't broken into, but and many people that we haven't followed up with because we just haven't had the capacity. But just to say, we're talking about the bioregional movement, and that is a really significant one, but there are these others that are out there.
Thank you, Claire, and yeah, thanks, Brandon, everybody. This is a tremendous amount of work, and I think the summary worked out pretty well. I was able to follow it pretty easily. Question is, who is on the board and how are they chosen?
Yeah, thanks. That's a whole nother I had a couple slides on it, and we decided it might just be too much since we were pushing it. But yeah, just to help give a little bit of an update on, like, when we say we're a 501c3, when we say Department of Bioregion, when we say, so what we're actually trying to do is, like, Department of Bioregion was started in 2019. And it was started by many people who have been active in the Cascadian bioregional movement for a really long time. And it kind of was started with this idea of creating these departments that could help build the idea of bioregions. But now it's actually at a really great inflection point, I think. And the board is transitioning and the other stuff. And honestly, after Claire and I started meeting with Regenerate Cascadia, the oomph and power, and I mean, like, so some of our board members right now, it's a fairly small board, but they actually helped host the Regenerate Cascadia tours, and we're very involved in that sense. And so I think the idea is actually to merge the two things together and actually bring it under the umbrella of Regenerate Cascadia. So the idea is to have some type of process, which we don't know yet, but to create, like, almost like a leadership team. And maybe it starts with a voting, non-voting membership or something, but or the idea of, like, these committees, or something where it really is, it's people who are emerging around the ideas of helping define governance, of communications and PR, of fundraising and grant writing, of accounting, and really helping maintain the legal and financial framework. It's not even about making decisions, but it is about creating, like, making sure that we're aligned with the mission and vision and the long-term goals, but also making sure that people aren't violating the law, that we're not going into the red, and making sure that we're, like, filing our paperwork, which then empowers everybody, all the hubs, all the groups, to be able to get grants and do other things like that. And so this process is a little bit interesting, but my hope is to develop a hybrid process where people actually step up through participation in, in the different areas where they need, and then actually can kind of just take it over and be. And what I think what's interesting actually though is this idea of the top level whatever is beyond also just Regenerate Cascadia. I think what's really interesting is there are people who watch the activation tour and the summit and what we're doing, and they actually they want to do an activation tour and start a Regenerate group. And that is in the Mississippi, it is in California. And so I think what we need to do is create both a Regenerate Cascadia leadership team, which can help define the governance here, and then also be putting together these materials and frameworks where we can start co-creating them with other bioregions as well. And honestly, in the long term, that board structure will probably sit, hopefully, on a continental or a global level. And I think we should be scaffolding in to think about what that might look like. And so when Claire talks about subsidiarity, it really is like there's things decided on the watershed that makes sense to decide on the watershed. Then there's stuff that's going to be decided between watersheds on the eco-region level. And then there's going to be stuff that's decided by all of Regenerate Cascadia on that. So that'll be a level where we need governance and a leadership team. But then there might be that traveling across, there might be a Mississippi and a Great Lakes. And what would be really wonderful is if we had some type of governance body which could bring us all together. But maintaining the sovereignty and unique stories of each.
Okay. So who are the actual people that are involved right now? And are these people who are active in Regenerate Cascadia, or usually there's some combination of active people and people who are intentionally separate from it?
So, I mean, I don't think so. So basically we have Alex and Audrey Day who live in Olympia. They're both lawyers. Our board president was Jay Conrad, who recently just stepped down. And this is of the Department of Bioregion, because they just started working. I think actually they're at Georgetown and are clerking for the Supreme Court. And then we have Yogi, who was one of the Salmon Nation stewards. We have Trevor and Alex. So it's a nice group of people. Another one is Michael Castor. He's like a human rights activist and organizer. So they've basically been stewarding it since 2019. They're all really excited and passionate about Regenerate Cascadia. And so it's kind of an opportunity for us to actually take with what we're doing with Regenerate Cascadia and build in whatever the backbone is that we would like it to look like, and figure out what those structures are. And the way I think of it as kind of this idea of a scaffold, it's a temporary structure that holds it from the outside while the inside grows. And then when the scaffold is done, it falls away and removes itself. I think ultimately my hope is that there can be a clear pathway from somebody who's getting involved for the first time to becoming an ambassador, to a steward, to basically a project leader, being involved in a guild, getting involved with the committee, and then being able to be, go all the way up to maybe or some type of bioregional congress. But that's all the space that I don't think has actually, we don't know yet. It hasn't evolved or emerged. And that's also where I think we really need to be inviting in a lot of voices and working with the different places to be building in the structures we need.
Yeah.
So all to say, I don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe
Thank
also
you.
just put,
All right. Thanks, Brian.
just just to add to the transition stage that it's in, is trying to register and just exploring the whole nonprofit across the border thing in Canada, so that I'm in Victoria, Brandon in Seattle, so that actually creates a really good sort of even experiment, even as that. Yeah, so and then I missed if you had mentioned it, but really looking at changing the name from Department of Bioregion to Regenerate Cascadia, so using the existing structure. to really sort of recognizing that it's in a stage of transition, and that there's an opportunity there, but there's also the stable piece. The fact that it's there, that's a lot of work to get all of that set up, and to be able to offer it as basically that's why we use the image of the backbone. It's a thing that's supporting all of the other things right now. So really thinking about what we're doing as a hybrid model. This is huge. Cascadia and all of the different dimensions. So you've got the local watershed hub groups that can actually be supported by a legal entity, and maybe they'll register as their own nonprofit, maybe they won't, but it allows them the flexibility of being an emergent group. But the thing is, having the governance that we are starting to look at within that structure is like really looking at what are the core values, what is the vision, how do decisions get made. That is going to be critical for the different components other than the nonprofit.
Yeah, thank you, Claire. Just another question about the board. My understanding of a nonprofit board is one of the responsibilities there is to be like actively involved in fundraising for the organization. So I'm wondering what activities are happening within the board to try to get funding.
Sure. There's different types of boards, right? So you have you can have founding boards or working boards, and usually in late stage nonprofits, it becomes primarily either a governing or a fundraising board. I would see it as one of the things is like a fundraising and grant writing committee that could exist both to try and bring in financial support for Regenerate Cascadia, but also to offer services to different hubs, projects, guilds that might need the support. I think that would be like a wonderful. So for example, one of the cool things we can do is offer academic internships. And so we just had someone who's going to school in Portland for disaster preparedness and is taking a grant writing class, needs to get academic credit with a nonprofit or something. And they can actually come on board now to help write grants for their next quarter. And so there's these little things like that that I think are valuable. But yeah, the answer is that our board doesn't have any defined, I think what I'm interested in is creating a transitionary process that can see this like these conversations of government. What's nice is the board as it exists can hold a container while we figure out the transition. And so it gives us a little bit of breathing room to not have to do everything like immediately. Like we don't have to do it next week. We don't have to do it, but we can actually build in and figure out what we want that process to be. And we can do it through like needs arising. And I think really doing it by role, like I use the word committee. Think of a different word. I don't know. There's way better ones out there, I'm sure. But but really thinking about it by need, right? So if there are some people who will not join a hub, who will not join a guild, but they are passionate about helping raise money. And it is great to have a place that we can offer to say, hey, if that's you, get on up here and let's do this. And then to have some of that money going to all the hubs, to going to all the guilds that can actually help support the backbone. And then also providing, I think a big thing too that structure provides is payroll, HR, taxes, contractor things. Like we can build in really healthy, valuable things there to make sure that like people aren't being manipulated or taken advantage of or things like that. The legal side of it too, for example. So just right off the bat, we've been talking with Chuck here in Seattle. He's with the Seeds Collaboratory. They're looking for a fiscal sponsor to explore how to do crypto, blockchain. I don't know, Mike or some of these other people would be much better than I to talk about this. But anyways, they're looking for a sponsor so they can get a grant that actually explores like blockchain technology for nonprofit accounting to create like invoicing documents. When they get sponsored by us, one of the things that we're going to provide is like access to our legal team of lawyers to actually say what is legal for like to sponsor as a nonprofit activity, what is not, because they also have like, when you get into like cryptocurrency, what's a liability, what's not a liability. And then we can be using the what we learn through that process to actually create educational materials for other people doing cryptocurrencies and blockchain Web3 technologies for what's actually legal, what's not, how to sponsor your activities, how to get some of it like banked or not banked, how does it work with contractors that are around the world? How does it work with DAOs? and actually helping define, like a lot of it's a very gray area. And we can use our resources to actually help groups define that. So it's kind of just a cool opportunity.
And you know, I'm looking at the time and realizing that there's Telegram still, if you've got questions. And yeah, we will be doing the presentation again, probably with a few more condensed slides, but thank you for coming.
Yeah, and I would love to invite everybody to, give feedback and input, and we'll kind of take all that and kind of keep trying to condense it and clean it up every time.
And the tech support actually has an email, may not be on the website, but it will be soon. Besides Telegram, if you don't want to be on Telegram, we do have a tech support team now.
Yeah, David Haskell, I see your question there. Yes. Oh, you're muted. Oh.